We're getting serious now. My top 100 fantasy books. I've already given you 3 episodes. Working up from the bottom, which means today, numbers 21 through 40. It's got to be some really good books, right? Let's find out. Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things we enjoy. Just Jim the father here again today because I'm back once more to work on my top 100 fantasy books that I've read here of 2024. It's not been easy to put this list together. It has been fun, though. I've given you already 60 of these great books, and if you haven't checked out those episodes yet, be sure to go back and do that. You might want to do that before you get to these because they do really kind of build up to this point. But I've only got 40 books left. You know there's got to be some awesome titles on here. If you know me, if you've watched the other ones, you also know there are some series that will still have some recurring books somewhere in these lists. I'm looking forward to telling you what they are. So why wait any longer? Let's just get to it. We're going to start at the bottom again, number 40. And it's a big boy, a fantasy, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Published in 2007, this book is famous and infamous because it's exceedingly well written. It's a delightful fantasy story. It's a trilogy that only has 2 books available. And Rothfuss, for over 12 years now, has been unable to finish the last book. We've gotten a couple of novellas. He's given us little extra stuff to enjoy in this world he created, but the finish is not there. And he's on the record. He's not sure if he's ever going to be able to. I guess he wrote a check that was too big. He can't let us cash it. Regardless, The Name of the Wind is that good. It's an amazing fantasy tale in a very fresh, epic fantasy world, full of magic, full of tension, full of Kvothe, this unique character with a dark and hidden backstory, amazing potential and powers, extremely intelligent, and quite gifted as a musician. Just all around, a wonderful character who primarily here in this book is going to school. And if people would just let him go to school, everything would be wonderful. But stinking Ambrose, man. I'm not going to say any more. This isn't about spoilers, but The Name of the Wind. I put it off for years because I don't want to read something that's not going to be finished. You know me. You know how I feel. A whole bunch of you feel the same way. But I caved. There was pressure. Read the book. It's that good, Jim. They're right. It is that good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's number 40 on my list. Number 39 is one not many of you would probably put on your top fantasy list, but I do. It's Watchmen, that comic graphic novel. It's really just a comic, but it was a series, just a limited edition series that Alan Moore produced back in 1987. It took me many, many, many years to get around to reading it, as in last year. I finally read it last year. I primarily read it because that movie was sitting out there, been out there for quite a while too. I was like, I think I'd like to watch that movie sometime, but I always want to read the source material first. So I went and read the comic and I went, what the heck? Why? Why did I wait so long? This was a wonderful tale. Superheroes, comics like this definitely falls in a subgenre of fantasy for me. Watchmen, it's magnificent and a solid 39. Heck, I put it ahead of The Name of the Wind. Number 38. Back to one of my favorite series. This is The Eye of the World, Book 1 of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time, dazzling the world when it came out in 1990. Okay, it took a little time to catch on, just a little. But I think I found the series by 94, and there were already a number of books out there, and it was already bestseller material. The Eye of the World is where it all begins. It's not the strongest of the books, but it is foundational. I enjoy the fact that The Eye of the World has some quirky things in it that never occur again, and almost like we don't talk about that now. We're going to pretend that didn't happen. It's just a few little things. Robert Jordan was clearly still feeling his way through this world he was creating, and what he made is so magnificent that we likewise just will not talk about things like Moraine having a Gandalf staff. So there you go. The Eye of the World, number 38. Let's move on to number 37, coming from a different one of my favorite fantasy series, and that would be Proven Guilty, Book 8 of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, the epitome of urban fantasy. I've got a number of these already on the list here, but I'm getting to better and better ones here. Proven Guilty is just one I thoroughly enjoy because of the setting that it's placed in. SplatterCon, but also the elevation of Molly Carpenter as this little bit character to a primary character and a foundational piece of the rest of the series. And also how Harry Dresden's role shifts here from just being his on his own schmuck wizard detective to also now being a mentor, a teacher, someone with responsibility. Proven Guilty was published in 2006. Number 36. Let's go back to Patrick Rothfuss and the Kingkiller Chronicle, Book 2 now, The Wise Man's Fear, published in 2011. So the follow-up to The Name of the Wind, coming out 4 years later. The Wise Man's Fear is a little longer than The Name of the Wind. I feel it's even better than The Name of the Wind, obviously, because I have it a little higher on the list. There's much more territory covered in this book, and Kvothe has to pull so many more tricks out of his hat. He has to grow, he has to advance, he has to show his capabilities are developing significantly. It really goes farther, deeper, better, still with Rothfuss's exceptional writing. I don't tend to focus on the quality of the writing in much of what I read. I'm about a good story. And yet, this can smack me over the head because it is so obviously excellent writing. The fancy people say the prose is fantastic. It's good writing, but it's also a great story. I do hope Mr. Rothfuss someday can get around to delivering that final concluding epic, even if he has to change it into 3 more books. I don't care. I'd just like to know how the story ends. Number 35. Silverthorn. Now, this is book 3 of Raymond E. Feist's The Rift War Saga, part of the Rift War cycle, which is over 30 books. But it starts off with 4 initial books that grabbed me, sucked me into the world, and made me want to read everything else that existed. And it's such a fun ride, but its peak is right up here in the front. There's 4 opening books. And this is the first of those 4 books I'm going to put on my list. Yes, the other 3 are here also, and you'll have to wait to see where they fall. Silverthorn, you could say it's number 3. You could also say it's number 2, because the opening book, Magician, was published in the United States as 2 books, Magician Apprentice and Magician Master. So if you count those as 2 books, Silverthorn now is the 3rd book of an opening trilogy, sort of. I mean, there's another book coming after it. Anyways, it's complicated. I did put the Empire trilogy farther down the list at 50, 51, and 52. Those are the books that follow this opening quartet trilogy. You know. Anyways, Silverthorn came out in 1985, so it's back there a ways. It stands up. It's still worth a read today. Number 34 is the book that immediately follows it in the Rift War cycle. So Rift War, Book 4 by Raymond E. Feist, published the following year, 1986. Fantastic year. I graduated high school. And there was some good fantasy I was enjoying back at that time. A Darkness at Sethanon does get dark. It adds some elements to this story that are going to have many trickle effects over the rest of the series. I thought it was a great finish to this opening sequence, and therefore it's a touch above the one before it. Number 33, back to the Wheel of Time, The Dragon Reborn, Book 3 by Robert Jordan, published in 1991. So, The Eye of the World, just a little bit ago, was 1990. And then I've skipped over the second book to give you the third book in 1991. So 3 books, bam, bam, bam. That's pretty intense, and that's a great way to build a fan base. Woo! The Dragon Reborn is a strong conclusion to the opening story arc of the Wheel of Time, and then it goes on to be so much more. But this one comes in with a big finish. There are parts of the story that are a little, can we move it along, please? Or, not sure what's going on, at least the first time. On a reread, it's fantastic, but that's why it's only down here at 33 instead of being higher like some of you think I should have done. Number 32, a book that I'd put definitely higher than everything I've done so far, is Valor, The Faithful and the Fallen, Book 2 by John Gwynne, published in 2014. I've talked about Malice already. We had that earlier on this list, the opening book of The Faithful and the Fallen, a fantastic story. But Valor, much higher up. It takes the story in a way that's just moves it intensifyingly. I had trouble getting into Malice, no trouble with Valor. I'm just like, woo, I am along for the ride here. This is epic fantasy in all its epicness. It came out in 2014. Number 31 is the final book of The Faithful and the Fallen. So I already gave you Malice, book 1, and Valor, book 2. I'm jumping to book 4 for my number 31. That's called Wrath. It benefits from being the conclusion of this epic story, but there are aspects of the way John Gwynne chose to end this story that didn't work as well as I wanted them to. Slightly disappointing, which is why it doesn't end up higher. It's still a great story. I'm not diminishing it at all. It could have been greater. Wrath was published in 2016. Number 30. So here's the second 10 that I'm giving you today. Number 30 is going back to Anne McCaffrey's The Dragon Riders of Pern series with Dragon's Dawn. This is book 9, and it's how it all begins. We get to see the initial colonization of this planet by a spacefaring human race. Anne McCaffrey was a science fiction writer. The Pern books, even though they have dragons, they are science fiction. And here we get down to the roots of that science fiction, where it's extremely obvious as they show up in space-borne colony ships and establish a permanent colony here on Pern. And then how everything, after going really great, goes really bad because of the surprise encounter of Thread. I won't tell you more about that, but it's fantastic to, at this point in the series, to be able to go back in time and see how it all got started. Dragon's Dawn, published in 1988. And I also want to point out, it's not just, oh, let me give you a prequel. She is laying the ground with this book for the additional books that are going to come to advance the story from its starting point, from where we got in the initial trilogy and such. She gives you more context so that as we go back to our primary characters we've met in the beginning, we're going to see them start to discover the things that we already know because we got a prequel book. She's quite masterful at how she does this. And at the same time, Dragon's Dawn by itself is a gripping and intense story that anyone would love. Number 29, back to the Dresden Files. I'm giving you Cold Days, book 14. This one's well into Jim Butcher's series. It's published in 2012. The stakes are getting higher and higher. Remember, there's only 17 books in the series, so 14, you're quite near the end of what we have so far. Cool book. Pun intended. Number 28. Okay, now I'm going to give you that final book of John Gwynne's The Faithful and the Fallen. Book 3, called Ruin, which was published in 2015. I don't have anything I can tell you about it here. I'm going to say it's the best of the series. It's the best of 4 excellent books. They're all here on my top 100. I mean, come on. There's nothing weak about The Faithful and the Fallen. It was a matter of me deciding how do I slip them in into the midst of all the other books that I value. So this one, for me, is the best. Number 27, Skin Game. Number 15 in Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files. This book, man, it has a tremendous impact on the story, and yet it's just a heist job. So in some ways, it's like a throwback to the early days of the Dresden Files, where it was like flavor of the month. We just have this self-encapsulated story. So suddenly we have this self-encapsulated story again. And yet it's not. It's laying out some foundational shifts and changes to Harry Dresden, to other characters like Murphy, Michael Carpenter, big shifts to things that are going to impact what comes in the next two books, which are the last ones we have. And at the same time, it's a fantastic story and reveals some surprises that are part of this overall arc that we call the Dresden Files, because Jim Butcher has tied all these books together brilliantly. Skin Game came out in 2014 and then left people hanging a while before he continued any more of the series. Number 26, Back to the Wheel of Time. Lord of Chaos, Book 6. This book is huge in how it changes the Wheel of Time. The first three books, kind of a self-contained trilogy. Book 4 and Book 5, I haven't talked about yet at all, but they've advanced the story. They've opened the scope of the world, but Book 6 changes everything, especially Rand al'Thor. No spoilers. I won't tell you what or why, but that's a main character who, wow, his perspective on things and his ways of going about things is transformed here, and not in a good way. Lord of Chaos came out in 1994, and it is, I believe, the single longest book in the Wheel of Time. Number 25, Heroes Die. Book 1 of The Axe of Cain by Matthew Stover, published in 1998. Oh my. I read this book recently, and I was blown away. Extremely well-written blend of fantasy and some sci-fi. It's clearly a fantasy novel, but it has a sci-fi bend to it. I do not know why people do not speak about this more often. I only heard of it because of Drew McCaffrey, friend of the show, and part of the duo who puts out the Inking Out Loud podcast. So there's a shout out for them. I'll put something down in the show notes so you can find their show. Drew's a huge fan of The Axe of Cain. Thank you, sir, for pointing us to it, because Zach's already read these. He loved them. Now it was my turn, and yeah, fantastic. Just gripping. Excellent writing, fantastic characters, a plot that you cannot guess. It just keeps hitting in amazing ways that are surprising, yet, oh yeah, that makes sense. The author is not just pulling things out of his butt. He's got a well-designed narrative that delivers in powerful ways, and the ending is just so satisfying. So, Heroes Die, number 25. High praise, way up on the list. Number 24, Back to the Wheel of Time, The Gathering Storm, Book 12. This book is written by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. It's the first of the books of the Wheel of Time that came out after Robert Jordan passed away. He died before he could finish his series. He intended there to be one more book. He dictated a whole bunch of notes of what should happen. He also had many things already written in his study that the estate then took and found Brandon Sanderson as an established fantasy author and said, hey, come on in. Let me show you this stuff. Finish the series. Sanderson worked very hard to do so. He also added some of his own ideas. He was a Wheel of Time fan, like many of us. And in 2009, the fandom was overjoyed to see, yes, a new book. But it wasn't the final book like we thought was going to happen. Instead, it was book 1 of 3 to finish. So to finish the series takes 3 huge volumes. The Gathering Storm delivers. The other 2 final ones are on this list higher up. Gathering Storm, it's kind of a precursor. It's a Gathering Storm. So it's just a little lower down here because the content doesn't grab you as much as later things will. There's nothing wrong with the Gathering Storm. It has some incredible moments. And as a fan who was waiting for this and thinking we may never get any more, I was in love. Number 23, back to the Dresden Files. Changes, book 12. One of the favorite books for a lot of the fandom who enjoys Jim Butcher's Dresden Files. Changes came out in 2010, and it changes the series. There's no more just playing around, Harry Dresden. Stuff has gotten a lot more serious because of the events that happen in this book. Events that happen to Harry and events that Harry causes in massive seismic change ways, and even the addition of a new character and a loss of a long time one. I mean, big stuff. The series really changes. It's a very appropriate name. Number 22, Towers of Midnight, book 13 of the Wheel of Time. So this is the follow-up to The Gathering Storm, and it came out the next year, 2010. Again, Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. All of these final books have actual content Robert Jordan wrote. And Brandon Sanderson just placed and then wrote the things around it to make it all fit together, filling in all the gaps. And again, adding some of his own things that Team Jordan approved. So this is part 2 of that final trilogy. There's some huge revelations in this book. Some key events happen that are major full series payoffs, as well as a few key elements that are added or occur that are primarily setting things up for the big finish. It's a delightful book to read, very satisfying. I loved it. But still, there's 21 more books that I put as better than Towers of Midnight. What in the world could those be? Well, I'm going to give you one more of them today. Number 21 is Blade of Tyshel, the second book of Matthew Stover's The Axe of Cain. I read this one very recently, and wow. Just wow. I have my own 6-minute review just going a lot of wow into the microphone. Okay, I give a little more detail than that, but it is spoiler light. You might go check that out. But this book was shockingly good. It's quite long. I did it on audiobook, and it was over 31 hours of listening time. Yes, I listen at 1.0 speed. But I mean, it just kept delivering, and here's a climax, and then no, that's not the end. Let's do more, and here's another climax. Whoa, and no, now let's go do more. And it was always climbing higher and higher and higher, better and better. Blade of Tyshel, 2001 publication. So good. Currently, I'm reading book 3 in this series now, Cain Black Knife. And it's off to a good start. But it won't be on this list yet. Maybe next year. All right, that's where I leave you for today, 21 through 40. What do you think? Leave me your comments. I've really been enjoying the comments that have shown up on the previous episodes. One person's comment was, really? Well, each to our own. I do not expect you all to have to agree with me. I expect a lot of you to thoroughly disagree with me. But what I really enjoy is when you tell me what you disagree with and why. I respect everybody's opinions here, and I'd just love to hear, okay, what do you think isn't good enough? What do you really think is, yeah, absolutely? Or what did I put on here that you think, no, man, that should be number 1. That should be so much higher. Let's talk about these things. This just adds to the fun. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.